welcome to this new edition of Business Africa, your magazine dedicated to the continent's business and economic news. As usual, you can win $150 in our Business Africa game. More details later, but first, today's top stories. Cited as an example by several economists for its dynamism and good governance, let's find out what are the secret ingredients of Rwanda 30 years after the genocide.
It's like we want to make sure that the overall vision of this country is translated into short-term, medium-term and long-term strategies.
Power outages continue to penalize a majority of African countries. In Somalia, a hospital in Mogadishu has been using solar power to save lives.
So you don't have energy, you don't have water. And you can imagine in a hospital where there is no water, and in the same time there is no energy.
The new UNCTAD report on the least developed countries has just been published. In diplomatic terms, the report focuses on development actors, donors, as well as receivers. The author, Rolf Traeger, will be joining us later.
There is no fatality, nothing is written on stone, and everything depends on what policies, what strategies, what measures are implemented by political and economic agents.
And finally, we'll head to Ghana to discover how a private-public partnership is allowing thousands of small hevea cultivators to become their own bosses.
If you want to plant your future, plant rubber trees. That's all.
With an average growth of 7.5% per year and a GDP per capita multiplied by 4 in 10 years, Rwanda is considered as an economic virtuoso in Africa, and its development strategy is cited as an example by the experts. Even if, for the FAO, 40% of the population, nearly 5 million people, are still malnourished. What are the keys to the Rwandan success? A report by Eric Mounier.
Rwanda's economic policy is changing. While significant progress has been made in recent years, the level of poverty is still high, and by international comparisons, the economy remains sluggish. Recognizing these problems, the government has undertaken substantial reforms. One is the restructuring of the private sector. Coffee, for example. This is a key driver of the national economy that involves nearly 1 Rwandan in 5, and 90% of produce is exported. However, coffee remained largely unorganized, with those involved in the industry working individually.
You would find a coffee exporter not knowing the coffee producers, not knowing the suppliers of inputs, pesticides, seeds, and all the others, and even the government agencies that are in charge of that sector, development of the coffee sector in Rwanda, not knowing who the players are. So from a planning point of view, we started with a very basic, what we call cluster mapping.
Cluster mapping is a way to bring together the players in a given sector. The Coffee Exporters and Processors Association was created in 2010. It became an important advocate and a privileged interlocutor of the government. Its members agreed to establish standards for the quality of export products and production methods. The cluster can also benefit from preferential rates, for example by combining purchases of fertilizers in large quantities. Ultimately, the common objective of its members is to improve the production and profitability of their operations.
Being organized, it will help us to increase, for example, the yield. Up to now, each tree is producing 0.7 kilo of green coffee. But we know that in other countries, they can go up to 2 kilo per tree. So if we can work with the farmers and be able to increase the yield, that means we're going to be doubling their production and their resources. So it's very important for the economy.
This restructuring is only one component of the Rwandan government's comprehensive reform plans that affect not just the economy, but education, agriculture and governance. The public can monitor progress on a purpose-built website, Rwandapedia.
Rwandapedia, it's a data management system that can be anytime updated by the institution, but also by the public, because they can have access through contribution to provide content on the website. Financial-wise, we've been benefiting from money from the AFDB that's really actually helped for the kickoff of this project.
International donors are supporting all these efforts. The African Development Bank provides help in the area of infrastructure, the private sector, and also for capacity building. To this end, the SPU has been set up to advise the government of Rwanda on its strategic directions in economic matters.
What is important about what units like SPU or the units under the Prime Minister's office do is like we want to make sure that the overall vision of this country is translated into short-term, medium-term and long-term strategies. So this is where I think you need some people at the central government level who are looking at the bigger picture, not only at some specific strategy in the ICT sector, in the financial sector. So we really need that overall picture, and this is what we are trying to do.
With a gross domestic product that's increased fivefold in 20 years, Rwanda's economy is being structured around a voluntaristic economic policy that's paying off. There's been a strong and steady growth of around 8% per year, which should enable Rwanda to cut its dependence on foreign aid and greatly reduce social inequalities.
After several months of training in China, Ede Dona Etri, Togolese designer of the e-agri-business platform, has signed an agreement with Chinese Quanfeng Aviation. The contract plans to launch a training of young pilots and an agricultural UAV manufacturing unit in Togo for the West African market. Objective to train 500 pilots by 2022. According to the WFP, the World Food Programme, Burkina Faso is experiencing a serious humanitarian crisis with unprecedented economic consequences. Nearly 500,000 people have been forced out of their homes, and 1/3 of the country is shaken by insecurity, bringing the number of displaced people in the 3 Sahelian countries to 860,000: Burkina, Mali and Niger. The UN agency is calling for $150 million from the international community to deal with the emergency. In 2019, the WFP provided food assistance to more than 2.6 million people in the Sahel. While Africa has nearly 1 billion inhabitants, the continent has the same electricity provision capacity as Germany, which has only 80 million. Cuts are multiplying and impacting many individuals, traders and industries, but also health professionals, like in this hospital in Mogadishu, Somalia, with quite an innovative solution. Take a look.
Although Africa has almost 1 billion inhabitants, it produces only as much electricity as Germany, which has a population of just 80 million inhabitants. What's more, the continent has exceptional natural resources that should enable it to produce clean energy and satisfy its growing demand for power.
We have a challenge here in Africa. The challenge is it's a dual challenge. One is to basically grow out of poverty. And the challenge is to do that in a sustainable way. Clean energy is the conduit through which they can achieve these two goals.
We in Africa have the opportunity to introduce green energy in places where there actually is no energy at all.
And time is running out. As the entire African economy is penalized, the health sector is directly affected. with hospitals regularly disrupted by power cuts. This is Somalia, which has been at war for 2 decades. The Medina Hospital in the capital Mogadishu is one of the country's 2 main medical centers, treating several hundred patients each week. The hospital specializes in emergency operation, treating war wounds or dealing with complicated births. Naturally, the hospital needs a constant power supply. The power for the hospital was provided by diesel generators, which were very unreliable, causing many blackouts.
And we were having continuous problem with those because we were having one generator working each time. And then when that goes out of order, we were not having other substitutes to that. So for sometimes some days we were without energy. And you can imagine a hospital without energy. For some time, I remember, we were using the light of the mobile phone to finish the operation.
Every day, all the medical equipment would stop running for up to 8 hours, and there would be no water, as the water pump was electrically powered.
So you don't have energy, you don't have water. And you can imagine in a hospital where there is no water, and in the same time there is no energy. It means that hygienically the hospital will fall down, will be a place where you cannot keep patients. You have to just close that place.
With the help of the Norwegian government, officials in Mogadishu agreed to invest in a new power generation plant. W. Geertsen Energy Solutions from Norway, in partnership with Brede Nord from Holland, designed and installed a hybrid system featuring both solar and diesel power, in which the generator, in conjunction with the solar plant, provides uninterrupted power to the hospital at all times. The idea is simple enough, but for technical reasons had never been developed.
This is the combination of solar and generators, so solar and fuel. We use as much solar as possible and as less fuel as possible. And in the past it was so when you had solar, or you need a mains or you need batteries. Now we don't need the batteries anymore, so now we only use the solar system with a generator, and we try to use as less fuel as possible.
The goal is to reduce or eliminate expense. That means less fuel for traditional generators and no batteries for solar-powered systems. A technology that provides an alternative should there be a shortage of petrol. The solution came from the research department. With 3 generators connected, if one of them cuts out for lack of solar power, for example, another takes over. A software system monitors the performance of the generators and calculates the most efficient and least costly system, and subsequently switches between the machines. When there is no longer enough sun, the system swaps over to fuel as the source of power. This is only done as a last resort, only until the generators can revert to solar power. The investment was around €500,000.
It is funded by the local government out of Kenya, government from Somalia, and the government from Norway. Those are the guys who have bring up the money to bring up the solutions for the people, and a hospital that can do surgery, and mainly also for maternity, where all these little babies get born. But you know what? Without electricity, it's very difficult.
With an average of 300 days of sunshine each year, fuel use is reduced to a strict minimum. Although installation costs are higher than for traditional generators, the system will cut the hospital's fuel bills by at least 30%.
By the time we were having 9,000 liters of diesel per month, and every day you are having light 18 hours. Now we have 6,000 liters of fuel, diesel, with 24 hours.
The savings on fuel will cover a large part of the initial investment costs. Within 6 years, the completed power plant, including the 3 new diesel generators, will have paid for itself. But the benefits are not merely in dollars and cents. Patient health care is vastly improved. Somalia has suffered a civil war for over 20 years, a conflict that has cost over 300,000 lives. The survival of the wounded, the victims of terrorist attacks, and the newborn is far from certain. But a reliable power supply and functioning medical equipment will help increase their chances of survival and, ultimately, full recovery.
Welcome back to Business Africa. UNCTAD's 2019 annual report on LDCs, least developed countries, has just been released. A report with a new tonality recommending that all development actors, recipient countries and donors make efforts to improve effectiveness of development assistance. Created 55 years ago, the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development brings together the 193 countries of the United Nations and aims to promote developing countries. The director of this report is an economist. Rolf Traeger is briefly in Paris and has agreed to answer to some of my questions. Hello, Rolf Traeger. Thank you for agreeing to shed some light on the latest LDC 2019 report coming out this week. Could you briefly wrap up the key takeaways from this report?
So we are launching the Least Developed Countries Report 2019 of UNCTAD. The main message about the least developed countries is that these countries are dependent on foreign sources for the financing of their development, foreign sources like official development assistance, foreign direct investment, philanthropist financing, South-South financing. And the main message is that it is absolutely essential that it be the states, the government of the least developed countries who take the essential decisions on their allocation, on the priorities of where these funds are allocated and how they are spent.
Reading your report, we get the impression that development aid, which represents billions of dollars each year, is sorely lacking in efficiency. Concretely, is there a waste of resources?
So, it's not to say that official development aid is wasted. It is very important for the development process of the least developed countries, but its efficiency can be increased if more aid is channeled effectively, and particularly if more aid is channeled to the productive sectors, which will result in the economic development and in the creation of more jobs in the least developed countries.
Well then, who are the actors that desperately need to improve their efficiency?
You are absolutely right. There's a role to be played by all actors which are involved in the development process of the LDCs. So it starts with their governments, their states, their bilateral donors among traditional donors, but also private investors, UN agencies, philanthropic organizations, NGOs, but also the southern voices, i.e. the developing country sources of external financing. And what is crucial is that all of these actors reach an agreement and then they act aligned according to the priorities which are set by national governments in consultation with their respective civil societies.
In spite of the slow progress in the fight against poverty, do you remain optimistic?
Concerning the question whether I am optimistic and why I am optimistic, I would say that yes, because there is no fatality, nothing is written on stone, and everything depends on what policies, what strategies, what measures are implemented by political and economic agents. So if there are synergies which are created between national governments, foreign donors, southern sources of financing, NGOs, philanthropists, etc., it's possible to establish synergies among them, provided that they are centered around the structural transformation of the economy of these countries, which will make them generate more economic activities, new types of sectors and new types of economic activities will generate more and better jobs, and thereby it's possible through these agreements between these different actors to go towards sustainable development.
Thank you, Rolf Traeger.
Thank you very much.
Some 20 Ivorian companies have just visited Liberia after receiving an invitation by local authorities. According to the National Investment Commission, the country imports nearly 99% of its industrial and consumer needs from China, Japan, the United States, the European Union and Ivory Coast. For the Ivorian entrepreneurs, Côte d'Ivoire has great advantages over its competitors. A common border and 1-hour flight to connect Monrovia and Abidjan, major assets facilitating trade between the two neighbors. Ethiopia has just secured $90 million from the IFAD, the International Fund for Agricultural Development, for a project to strengthen livelihoods in the lowlands. With a total cost of $451 million, this initiative aims to increase resilience to climate shocks in the poorest regions of the country, mainly in regions that depend on rain-fed agriculture and pastoralism for their survival. The project is expected to benefit to 500,000 Ethiopian families. In Ghana, agriculture accounts for almost 20% of GDP and employs 42% of the labor force. GREL, the Ghanaian subsidiary of the Hivia International Planting Company, is the industry leader in the country. Operating around 50,000 hectares of plantations, it sources from 9,000 small producers. Thanks to a public-private partnership with a French development agency, small-scale farmers are benefiting from a vast program launched since 1986 to assist them. A report by Aurélie Turc.
While Ghana has entered the club of African oil producers, it hasn't forgotten about its agricultural sector by focusing on the cultivation of rubber trees. Now the third largest exporter of rubber in Africa, alongside the Ivory Coast and Cameroon, Ghana aims to take full advantage of the sustained rise in natural rubber prices, the result of a growing demand from the automotive industry. 240 kilometers west of Accra, at Takoradi, an extensive program of village rubber plantations set up through a public-private partnership has already benefited more than 80 local communities. The objective is to allow new farmers to operate their own plots.
I first came into this rubber project in '95 when they were introducing rubber into the system. They give me all the necessary education about rubber, the culture practices, how to maintain rubber, how to do everything, and I did it accordingly. And now I have about 5 hectares of rubber, which I intend still expanding to improve upon my farming project.
By the end of 2011, with plots of 4 hectares per farmer or outgrowers, nearly 22,000 hectares of rubber trees were planted by more than 5,000 villagers. They sell their products to GREL, the Ghana Rubber Estate Limited company, a subsidiary of the Ivorian Sifka business. GREL uses 15,000 hectares of rubber and treats 16,000 tons of latex each year in this plant. Almost all is sold to Michelin for the manufacture of tires.
It has increased tremendously the participation of smallholders in that industry. We started from virtually zero under smallholders to now more than 50% under smallholders in a space of just 17 years.
As rubber is harvested throughout the year, sales of natural rubber at the factory provides producers with a regular monthly income of 700,000 FCFA, more than 1,000 euros, which is 10 times the average agricultural wage in Ghana. It provides a solid financial foundation for the farmers to eventually set up business on their own.
We are able to advocate for more phases and then also negotiate for better price for our members. We don't want our farmers to be going to the banks all the time to access extra what you call credit. We have realized that it is very, very costly. So we've also put in place credit union so that we all contribute to it, and then if one needs a loan, we can give it out to at a very low interest rate.
A new package worth 18 million euros to support the villagers' plantations in the western and central regions of the country is scheduled for next year. The goal now is to expand the program to other private partners while ensuring compliance of fair competition with the smallholders.
As to the plantations, GREL holds a virtual monopoly, but the reality is that the small operator will want to set up a factory. So the idea today is to assist the private operator to set up a similar scheme so that he in turn will have his own outgrowers that can produce the rubber to keep its factory in business.
20 years after the launch of the project to support small rubber growers, success would seem to be assured. The development of the rubber industry in Ghana in recent years has helped reduce urban migration, increase farmers' incomes, and fight unemployment. It's hoped 3,000 additional jobs will be created within 2 years in the agricultural sector and amongst the young.
There will be a time every youth, I don't think they will dream of going to the urban centers to work. Because after all, when you go, what are you going to do? So the chiefs, we are ever ready to release lands for the youth to go into this laudable project.
Ultimately, this type of development and funding could serve as a model on the continent for a wide range of other agricultural sectors.
If you want to plant your future, plant rubber trees. That's all.
It's now time to reward our loyal viewers of Business Africa. It's up to you to answer the following questions. If you're drawn among those who have given the correct answers, you will win $150. This is game number 512, so listen carefully to the 2 questions that follow, and good luck.
First question. In Rwanda, in 4 years, GDP has increased 2-fold, 4-fold, or 5-fold. Second question. What is the percentage of Liberia's imports? 25%, 75%, or 90%?
And of course, don't forget to include your contact details, name, address, telephone, email, and the number of the game you are entering with the answers, of course. This game, for example, is number 512. The winner will receive $150, as does our winner this week. Congratulations, you gave the correct answers to our game number 508. Here are the details.
First question. In Ethiopia, coffee sustains 15 million. Second question. Agriculture in Africa represents 65%.
Well, that's it. Business Africa is over for today. I'll see you next week, same channel, same time with Initiative Africa. In the meantime, you can catch this program on our Vimeo and YouTube channels, and feel free to share, like, and comment using the hashtag Business Africa TV show. Have a great week. Bye-bye.